So this is the audience for my speech, and I'm going to be giving it on prison overcrowding. So I'd like you to picture yourself in a jail cell. Some of us don't just have to imagine that, some of us have experienced it. Now imagine yourself in a cell so packed with people that there's only standing room, and then you have to sleep in shifts or otherwise tie yourself to the bars in order to sleep standing up. This is a reality that's facing over 2 million people in the United States today. Prison overcrowding is one of the most crippling issues facing our country at the moment. However, there are many steps that can be taken in order to alleviate this issue. Aside from the research I've done on this topic, I personally know a couple of ex-prisoners, all of whom were convicted of nonviolent drug crimes. And as such, I've heard a lot of stories relating to their experience in that time and the reprehensible conditions in U.S. prisons at the moment. In this speech, I want to cover the specifics of prison overcrowding and then some of the effects that can arise from this, and also with some solutions that we could use to solve this issue. So first, I'd like to discuss the specifics of what it actually is. So prison overcrowding is the result of many compiling issues in our justice system. And while some people argue that incarceration is good for the safety of the general public, it has a lot of downsides, especially when it's performed at such high rates as it is in the United States. So I want you to imagine what it would be like to be a nonviolent offender in this situation. Imagine the feeling of having committed some sort of crime that had very few or no victims at all, and then being cooped up with people who might have committed heinous acts of violence. The U.S. is extremely overzealous when it comes to its prison system. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, roughly 2 million people are currently incarcerated, with 7 to 10 million being arrested per year. This means that the U.S. has the highest incarceration rate of any country in the world. To maintain these figures, roughly $445 billion are spent per year maintaining these institutions. And furthermore, an additional $350 billion are spent by the families of prisoners in order to send them food and collect calls from them. Prisons don't only affect us financially, they also have a huge social impact. According to science.org, incarceration in the right circumstances can be contagious in the fact that family members or friends of people who have been incarcerated are more likely to themselves be incarcerated, and the length of the sentence given to the original person directly corresponds to the seriousness of the crime that they end up committing. Our current prison system also helps perpetuate harmful generational cycles of poverty and inequality, often forming a sort of feedback loop that is extremely difficult to break. So how did all of this happen? This issue can be attributed to two primary culprits. One is that while prisons are extremely costly for the common taxpayer, they're actually very, very profitable to the private companies that run them. The other is an excess of misguided laws and precedents that encourage unnecessarily harsh penalties. So over the past few decades, federal and state governments have introduced many laws that encourage this harsh sentencing, supposedly in an effort to reduce possible criminal incentives. One major example of this is California's 3 strikes law, which says that any felony committed by a person with 2 previous crimes carries a minimum sentence of 25 years to life. The issue with this law is that it makes no distinction between violent and nonviolent crimes. Some other states have similar laws, but they do make this distinction. However, in California, it is not made, which means that this leads to cases such as that of Shane Reams, who's a young man who was sentenced to life in prison for simply being present when his friend sold $20 worth of cocaine to an undercover police officer. While one might argue that these sorts of laws come from, a well-meaning place, regardless of whether or not they're effective, many of them are actually designed to help feed the prison industrial complex. The prison industrial complex is an umbrella term used to describe both the public and private institutions that benefit from this sort of mass incarceration. Private prisons are an especially large problem. These are run by third-party companies with very little government oversight, which leads to very poor conditions because these companies are incentivized to save money by not providing proper maintenance or medical care to their detainees. This issue becomes even more apparent when the relationship between these private prisons and the government are taken into account, because the government is encouraged to take out huge contracts with these private companies. These companies in turn lobby the government in order to basically make harsher laws so that more people become imprisoned and these companies make more money off of that. This leads to mass incarceration, which creates extremely unsafe conditions inside these prisons. Medical issues skyrocket in these circumstances, and as I mentioned before, prisoners are commonly forced to either sleep in shifts or tie themselves to the bars of their windows so that they can sleep standing up. So there are a lot of proposed solutions to this, each one geared towards a particular aspect of the issue. However, two of the most wide-reaching solutions involve diverting more minor, like non-violent cases outside of the courts, and revising laws regarding nonviolent crime. So picture yourself back in that overcrowded cell and ask yourself whether anything of value is being learned in a place like that. I would argue that nothing is happening. In fact, for me, I feel like it would only make me a more bitter person, more inclined to commit crimes after that. Now instead, imagine yourself being able to operate freely, being able to contribute to your community, and being given the resources to help sort out your life and whatever issues may have driven you to a crime in the first place, such as drug addiction or mental health struggles. Imagine receiving help for that while also benefiting your community and community service type situations. I feel like that whole thing sounds a lot better. So investing in non-custodial sentencing and resources is a big step to reducing overcrowding. Non-custodial sentences are any that don't involve holding a convict in captivity. These can include community service, mental health counseling, and or drug rehabilitation programs. These sorts of sentences have been shown to be much more effective at reducing recidivism and the occurrences of serious crimes in the first place. So in this sense, we're tackling the issue at its source and sort of stamping it out before someone actually has the opportunity to commit a crime. Rewriting our outdated laws is another critical step to preventing overcrowding. Many state laws are written very ambiguously, which means that people will often receive sentences that don't necessarily fit the crime they committed. For example, in some states, simply cooking methamphetamine is considered a violent crime. So is stealing a purse or pickpocketing. Those are also considered violent crimes in many states. So the idea of minimum sentencing is another damaging aspect of our justice system. Minimum sentences are required by the law regardless of the circumstances of a specific case. They're most often used in the case of drug crimes, and this is where they're the most harmful, often leading to cases like Shane Reams, who I mentioned earlier. As such, we must abolish minimum sentences. They're an outdated relic from a time when people thought that more harsh sentencing would de-incentivize people from committing crimes, but nowadays we have the data that says that is not the case. So we should rewrite these laws in order to fit our modern understanding of how crime works. So while there are many other solutions that target more particular aspects of this issue, these are the two that I feel would make the biggest difference in the shortest amount of time. So prison overcrowding and our ways of dealing with crime in general in the United States is a huge problem. This is shown clearly in the fact that, again, we have the highest incarceration rate in the world. In fact, of all the people in prison globally, 1 in 5 of them is in the US. As a result of this, it's critical that we address the flaws in our justice system. We must rewrite our outdated laws and revamp them in order to allow for circumstantial flexibility. And we must also invest money into public programs that promote the social and financial well-being of people who might be less fortunate or living in more difficult circumstances. So, in short, we have all the data. All we need now is to start putting what we know into action so that we may rehabilitate the at-risk people in our population and rebuild the communities that have been torn apart by mass incarceration.